Hi, everyone. I want to start out today with a quick informal poll. How many people in here have ever been involved in a losing experiment? Would you raise your hand for me? Okay, good. Everybody's losers. I'm a loser too. I think it's the best way to treat that is to first acknowledge it, that we're all losers, and maybe now we can learn something. So I work for Ancestry.com, and for those of you not familiar with Ancestry, we are the world's largest online family history company, and we help people find and discover their ancestors. And as a part of that experience, I've had the chance during my time there to visit some of the places of my ancestors. So last summer, my wife and I took a trip. I don't know if it looks obvious at all or not, but I'm Scandinavian, at least partially Scandinavian. So we had a chance to go to Stockholm, Sweden, and learn a little bit about my ancestors. And while we were there, we visited this museum called the Vasa Museum. And I'd never heard of this before, but it was recommended to me by one of my colleagues in Sweden. And she said, oh, you got to go see this. Sight unseen, we just kind of went, let's go look at this museum. And what it is the Vasa is a ship. And in the year 1628, Sweden built this ship and they launched it. And it was a warship. And this beautiful ship, that certainly took them a long time to build, made it a total of 1,400 meters before it sunk, right there in the Baltic Sea. And it just kind of sat there. Now, the Baltic Sea is kind of unique. It's very cold, and it wasn't that far out there. So in 1961, the Swedish government said, let's go see this thing. Let's see what's going on with it, maybe what's happened with it. And so they actually pulled it out of the bottom of the sea. And what they discovered was that the ship had been remarkably preserved. And they pulled it right into the bay, and they built this big museum around it. And this ship is actually, I think the number is 95% intact and original. And that's just an incredible discovery for archaeologists and scientists and people who wanted to learn more about what life was like in Sweden in the 17th century. And so what they were able to do was learn things like what clothing were people wearing, what food were they eating. They even found bodies on the ship, just a beautiful, remarkable thing. And we had the chance to visit this museum and learn all about them, and I kind of got a glimpse into maybe some of what my ancestors' life would have been like. One of the things we learned about on this ship was that maybe the scariest thing facing sailors back in the days wasn't their enemies, it wasn't storms out on the sea, or even the ship sinking, although in this case hindsight's 2020. It was scurvy. And some of you may be familiar with scurvy and what it is. Basically, it's a sickness that really was common amongst sailors, and estimated to have killed over 2 million sailors between the years 1500 and 1800. And it's kind of characteristic of this man you see. If anybody's seen Pirates of the Caribbean, you've probably seen, they did a good job of depicting what scurvy looks like, but it's pale skin and these sunken eyes and really just bad teeth. And so it was just this terrible disease that was all a part of the sailor's life. And in the mid-18th century, a captain named James Lind came along. And James Lind was, as you can imagine, sick of men dying over this sickness, so they couldn't figure out what was going on. So he conducted what we now know was one of the very first clinical experiments. And he took 6 pairs of sailors, and he separated all of them, and he gave them all the exact same food with one main difference. And what he discovered was that for the one cohort of people that he gave lemons and oranges to, they started to recover. So what he didn't know that we know now is that scurvy was caused by a vitamin C deficiency. And so when these men got vitamin C, they started to recover. Now, I imagine this conversation with James Lind and his people when they figure this out. And they go, all right, we saved some lives, but here's the thing, we got to recreate this experiment. And what's the cost of that? Somebody's got to die. And so then they go, okay, well, all right, who do you like? We'll play some bets here. I like this guy. I like this guy. We're going to give him oranges. That guy, he's going to get mush or whatever. Sorry, man. Those are just the breaks. But what Lynn knew and what all of us know that are in experimentation and testing is that there's a cost associated with every test that we run. But there's also upside. And the long-term goal and the hope is that the upside outweighs the cost. And so today I want to talk about being a loser. and I'm a loser. I'm just going to say it. And so I've determined, set up some 4 steps to learn from losing. I want to talk about these together. So the first thing is, why does it hurt so much to lose? Why do we hate losing? And we do. All of us do. Nobody likes being a loser. You didn't like it when I called you that. So to do that, I want to demonstrate with a little bit of a thought experiment here. I want to imagine, I'm going to give you an option here. The first one is I'm going to give you $500. Just because we're friends, I'm going to give you $500. Now, I wish I could give all of you $500 actually, but I can't. But just imagine, hypothetically, I offer you $500 and you can take that money and go to downtown Austin and buy your beard oil and craft tacos and hipster stuff, whatever else happens down here. Or I'm going to give you this choice. I'm going to flip a coin. And if the coin lands on heads, I'm going to give you $1,000. But if it lands on tails, I'm going to give you 0. So just for demonstration's sake here, how many of you people are taking $500? Most people. Who here wants to flip the coin? Some risk takers. All right. Okay? Now let's flip it. Same experiment, only you owe me. Okay? So out of the gate, you got to give me $500. I could use some of that beard oil. Or I'm going to flip the coin again, and if it lands on heads, you don't have to pay me at all. But if it lands on tails, you have to pay me $1,000. Who's taking the coin flip? Show of hands. Okay? Who's just giving me $500 at that point? Way less people, right? Some people do. Again, the risk takers. But why is this relevant? Well, it's relevant because the way that the human mind works is that losses are bigger on our minds than gains. So what that means is that the thought of losing $500 was harder for you, so you said, I'm going to take my chances. But the thought of gaining $500 was easy. It was like, I didn't have to do anything. I got $500. And that's the way that we operate every day in our jobs. It's the way that our counterparts operate and our superiors operate. And it's helpful to understand that and the way that we interact with them. And that's a normal thing. Not wanting to lose is a survival instinct. If you think back in the past, 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, our ancestors were driven by this constant fear of losing. But what it was really a fear of death. And every decision that they made had a risk associated with it, and they had to make a choice, and the choice they made was usually, its goal was to not kill themselves or not kill their family. And so that's something that's innate in us, and it's helpful to understand that that's just a part of us and a part of those that we work with on a regular basis. And so don't be afraid of losing. Understand it's natural to be afraid of it, but it's going to happen. So the second principle here is learning over knowledge. And this is kind of a mantra that we've adopted at Ancestry and something that we really love when we talk about testing. And this is the idea that knowledge is kind of finite. Knowledge is kind of set. When I say I know something, it's I don't need my mindset changed here at all. I already know it. I already know the answer to this question. And so I've run this test before. I've already learned and know the answer. We don't believe that way at Ancestry. And we constantly push ourselves on that. Even if it's something we've tested in the past, we say we still believe in learning over knowledge. And so really the way I want to talk about this is it's about designing all of your experiments in a way that you can derive learnings even from losses. And so this really kind of eliminates a lot of these baby in the bathwater type tests where you have an A and a B and they're so different from each other that there's really no way to learn from them. And all you can really do is say this one won over this one. That's the only learning you got there is one piece of knowledge. This was better than this. But instead what we try to do is say, what metrics can I put in place here? What ways can I track people that's unique, that gives me some advanced insight into this, even if it doesn't go the way we expect it to? So 4 or 5 years ago now, Ancestry's leadership decided they wanted to hire an industry best practice agency who was responsible for pricing and packaging. And this was a company who'd worked with hundreds of clients and claimed to have revolutionized businesses with the way that they charge their customers. And so we were totally open to the idea of working with them, thought it sounded great. And they spent months and months doing quantitative and qualitative research, using all of their skills and knowledge and best practices, and then they brought it to us. And they said, all right, we've got it. We're going to change the way Ancestry operates. We're going to revamp your entire business with this brand new experience. And they said, go ahead and just stick it on your website. You guys are good to go. And we said, well, hold on a second. We believe in testing. We believe in data here at Ancestry. And so instead, we're going to go ahead and test it on our website, and we'll let you know how it goes. Fail. And they were a little bit surprised by that. I thought, no, like this doesn't, that doesn't happen that way. Like most people just put it on their website, like let us try again. And we said, great. So together we worked with them to devise sort of a learning agenda, and we ended up running a series of tests trying to get a little bit more information about what may have happened versus the other rather than this whole, this versus this, throw the rest out experience. So in that first test, for example, one of the things we learned was we may be changing too much here. And we wanted to look at more of the smaller things we can change. So we set up a second test. What did we learn? Consumers aren't understanding the differences between our packages here. And they're just selecting the lowest price. We found that when we confuse consumers and they start going, I don't know what's going on here, they just go, give me the cheapest thing, like I'll start with that. But that didn't work on the aggregate. So third test. Now the offer pages are too complex. They're just spending too much time on this page. They're not getting through the way we expected to in some of our earlier experiences. Another test, learning. Too many people are taking short-term packages now. That's not healthy for our business. We have a good balance of both of long-term and shorter-term duration subscriptions at Ancestry. And when too many people move to the short-term, that's not good either. So we ran it again. It just isn't working. And so eventually we agreed with this agency, hey, sorry, we really appreciate all the work, but it just didn't work for our business. So then that begs the question, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And that was something we debated a lot internally at Ancestry. And it brings me to step number 3, and that is reframing a loss. So about 6 months later, I'm sitting in a big meeting, probably 20, 25 people in it, and as the meeting's wrapping up, one of our senior development leaders at Ancestry says, hey, can you stick around for a second after the meeting? So everybody kind of disperses after the meeting, and I end up sitting across the table from this guy, and he said, you guys are that new team that's doing all that testing, and I think you're ruining our business. And I'm sitting here like kind of taken back, and he says, yeah, you're messing with our metrics, you're messing with our money, and you're messing with my wallet, because all of these things you're doing are affecting our broader figures, and I'm not getting paid as much as I should. And I'm completely taken back by this. This guy who's 20 years my senior and 4 titles, my senior, sitting across the table basically attacking me. And so I decided I'm going to pull the only card I know how to pull in this scenario, and I quoted our CEO at the time, who used to use this when he talked about testing. He used to say, A/B tests are our cost of tuition. It costs money to learn. And so just like going to school costs money and tuition is expensive, you really hope that the balance there works out in your favor and that you end up making more money in the long run because you ran those tests. So that kind of sedated the guy for a second, and he at least let me go out of the room and on my way. But later on, I kind of got to thinking about this and this experience that we went through with this agency, and I started to kind of debate with people, and we ran some numbers. Now, these aren't actual numbers, but they're very illustrative and close, to like you can get an idea of what we learned. So I want to talk about the impact of testing, and so let's just assume Ancestry's baseline run rate is $100 million of revenue per year, and we go ahead and run these tests for this agency that brought it in, and it's a negative 10% to our business. Test duration was 90 days, and the negative impact over those 90 days was $2.5 million, meaning over the course of that year, we made $97.5 million. Now let's look at the other side of the coin, and say we just taken the advice of this agency and just implemented it. Didn't test it, we didn't have a testing team, we just went, okay, we'll stick it on the website. Same baseline run rate, $100 million, same negative lift, but this time, the duration of this negative lift is a 12-month period, an entire year. So our negative impact is $10 million that year. And the total money we made was $90 million. So I guess you're welcome, angry senior developer man who attacked me. Because I actually made you more money. Revenue because of testing was 97.5 million. Revenue without testing was 90. So we saved $7.5 million by testing instead of just implementing. And really, I think about the great philosopher JayZ. And I like to use this quote now at Ancestry. He says, "A loss ain't a loss, it's a lesson. Appreciate the pain, it's a blessing." And that's the way we operate at Ancestry. We don't believe in wins and losses. We believe in wins and lessons. That's our L, or wins and learnings. And now the fourth point. Keep iterating. Keep going. And I use this picture of bread because I want you to imagine that you're a professional baker and you're being given instruction to come up with a new bread recipe that doesn't exist today. Only here's the trick. You're not allowed to bake it. How well is that going to go for you? You're going to put new stuff in it and go, I think this is going to be good, but they're going to say, sorry, you can't put it in the oven, you can't taste the bread, and you just have to hope that it turns out good. Well, that's sort of the way that it is with testing. We can't expect that on our first try we're always going to get it right the first time. We just have to keep iterating and keep going. And the ideal situation here is that over time, we start turning our pains into gains. And so when you have a series of losing tests, and most importantly, the light bulb at the bottom, that insight, that lesson, that learning, you can inform your following tests and eventually turn them into a win. We had a little bit of this recently at Ancestry when we tested a new homepage design. And unfortunately, it was one of those full-on redesigns that you kind of have to do. And this was our old page and our new one, and we'd involved teams across the entire business, tons of people, tons of qualitative research, just all the information we could get to design this brand new page. And we were all really excited about it. But it lost. And it was one of those things where we can walk away from it, and we can throw our hands up in the air and say, sorry, like it's over, we lost, but we don't do that. And so we had set this page up with a bunch of those metrics, like I mentioned, measuring engagement and click tracking and all these different things. And what we found was that consumers were really loving the content on this page much more than this old page, and they were engaging with it in ways they never had been before, but the sales metrics weren't following. So rather than give up, we come up with another iteration here. We said, maybe our CTAs aren't strong enough. Maybe it's not obvious enough that I'm supposed to click on that plus button. So let's really make the CTAs pop. And so we tested this, but nope. That didn't work either. So we tried again. We said, maybe we've just got these in the wrong order. And maybe the family history, the tree experience, should be in front of this DNA experience that we saw as well. And when we did that, we saw some very positive signals that said, actually, this is the right way for us to be framing the business. But it still wasn't quite beating what we had before. And so finally, we took that insight and turned it into a new redesign on the top. We said, let's pull in some product imagery, make it look like there's some trees, kind of show where people's ethnicities could be from. And that ended up ultimately being our winner and a positive for the business. So if we'd given up after that first one, we wouldn't have this experience. And we wouldn't have what is ultimately a better experience for our consumers. And speaking of quotes, I like this one. This is one from one of Jeff Bezos' shareholder meetings a few years ago. He said, our success at Amazon is a function of how many experiments we do per year, per month, per week, per day. So really, this is them understanding that we don't give up. We run tons of experiments. We just keep trying over and over and over, and eventually we're going to come up with some wins. So think about this with your business and kind of where you are in this experiment cycle, in this losing cycle. Whether you're James Lind and kind of just the founding person of testing at your company, helping people understand there is a cost associated with it, but there's also upside, and that's what we can focus on, is that long-term win. Or maybe you're Jeff Bezos, who, boy, has that guy iterated in his physique over the years. Google that. But he understands, in a seasoned program, just how important it is to keep running experiments and keep trying. Or maybe you're the great JayZ. just teaching your company that losses ain't losses, they're lessons. Appreciate that pain. It's a blessing. So just rounding this off, my 4 steps to learn from losing tests. The first one, understanding why losing hurts. Remember, it's psychological. It's part of us. It's innate. Nothing we can do. Second, build tests for learning. Learning over knowledge. Third, learn to reframe your losses. Like Lucas mentioned earlier, if you rolled something out that didn't work, that's a valuable insight for your business. And then finally, you guys thought this was a typo. Iterate, iterate. Thank you.
Great job, man. I really enjoyed that.
Thanks.
I got that too. Cool, let's do some questions here. So, top question is, what tools do you use to track your tests and metrics?
To track? So Ancestry is kind of in a unique situation. I mean, maybe not unique for the crowd here, but there certainly is some people this is unique to. We care what happens on our website, obviously, and how many people sign up, but what we care about more is, like with the ClassPass example, how many more people pay us down the line. We offer a free trial subscription for Ancestry, and so we have to take our data out of our testing tool into our offline data warehouse, and then we pull it into a Tableau dashboard that's automated, and we're looking at those long-tail metrics like bill through, lifetime revenue, things like that that are more valuable for us. And so, yeah, we use Tableau, Adobe Target as our primary testing tool. We also use Split some, and yeah, and then we just automate it from there.
Cool. How do you convince upper management that losing tests aren't bad when you are expected to hit certain numbers for the year?
Yeah, good question. Certainly, like the numbers challenge, if you have expectations on volumes, budgets, forecasts, that can be a tricky thing. But again, to me, we use that cost of tuition argument over and over. And luckily, we're at Ancestry, where we really believe in data. And working at places and companies that believe in data, it certainly helps. And our upper management, they say, I have an example. We had our CEO recommend this test to us a couple of years ago, and it was this massive overhaul of our whole business. And it took us 6 months to implement. It was really nasty. And when it came back to him, totally failed. Just horrible. And we dropped that data on his desk, and he shrugged, and he went, okay, well, that one didn't work. What's next? And that got me really excited. And that's a great answer from an executive. And so because of that, we have a team that believes in data so much that they're willing to see those losses because they understand there are those gains. That several tests in a row that lose, as long as you have that winner at the end, they seem to be okay with it.
Were there any ways you validated your learnings post-test, such as through consumer survey or something to help you get the why behind a test failure?
Yeah, for sure, and that's something we do often. We do use a lot of voice of customer data after we get people into a test, where we'll pop a survey and try to understand the why. We also do heat maps and video session recordings, these tools that are much better at answering the why than the what. And so we really try to marry those two and not overly rely on any one versus another. I mean, obviously, we want the financial metrics to be the ultimate decision maker for our business, but we certainly do look for those whys.
Yes. I think you already answered the next question in the preso. Any suggestions on communicating the failure of experiments to executives? And that one was just downvoted.
I mean, honestly, my advice on that is don't try to hide it. Like, don't try to pretend like you don't have failing tests. That's such a reality in what we do, and it's not something to be ashamed of. No one should be ashamed to communicate that this didn't work, as long as you're able to reframe it positively for the business and help them understand that we learned something, or we learned that this didn't work, and that is good.
And people are curious to know what your North Star metric is.
So at Ancestry, our North Star metric is LTR. Like I said, we're a subscription business. We also offer a DNA kit, service. But really, ultimately, whenever we run a test, we're looking for that lifetime revenue, and our goal is to just maximize that with every test that we do.
And do you retest to make sure your wins are still winning? If yes, how much time after the win do you start retesting?
Yeah, that's a great question. For the most part, we retest when it comes up. So that happens all the time. New people will start at Ancestry and say, hey, we ever tried this? And usually their answer is yes, we have tried it because we've tested a lot. But we say, well, let's do it again. And so I would say we try, typically we're probably a year to 2 years before we're retesting something. But we certainly do that, and we believe strongly, like I said, in that concept of learning over knowledge, and knowledge isn't finite. So, we do iterate and try again.
All right, let's do one more. Big changes in an experiment often won't let you isolate the variables. How do you manage leadership when they expect you to take
This is a good time,
bigger
man.
swings when testing? Yes.
I'm not sure I got all that.
Oh, sorry, no.
Okay, big changes.
Yes.
How do you manage leadership when they expect you to take bigger swings? I think bigger swings are okay. Like, one of the ways I describe testing to people is I say, if I were driving, and we were both leaving a point at the exact same time, and we were seeing who could get there fastest, we'd both take different routes, and we'd see which one got there the fastest, right? And sometimes you have to just blow the whole route up and take an entirely new one to see how that one compares. So there's places and situations where that actually makes sense. But I just don't think the insight and long-term value is as high in those things. So for upper management's sake, I think take those bigger swings, especially when they're the ones who sign your checks. You kind of have to do those things. But make sure you caveat them and explain to them, like, this is what you get versus if I can set up one of these smaller tests designed to get me more meaningful learning.
Do you ever run an experiment with a lot of variables, and then if that one's successful, then run tests afterwards to understand like the smaller stuff?
All the time. Okay. Absolutely all the time. And that's what we did with that homepage test, right? We saw some of those, and we decided we were going to run something that would help isolate that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.